Aye. What can I get you?
Just a rump steak, thanks.
Julie, this guy wants just a rump steak.
Oh, we don't sell just a rump steaks here.
Was Bradman just a cricketer, Peter?
Tom Bradman was the greatest.
I hear, Bill.
Did Kate just do a spot of telly?
Oh.
And did Liesl just enjoy the occasional dip? You see, Peter?
You wouldn't call the Great Wall just a wall, or Everest just a foothill in Nepal. And your mum doesn't make just a bolognese.
Hey, Mum.
She makes the best damn thing you've had to eat in days. And I suppose by your logic that this is just a song, and you can try to order just a steak, and that is where you're wrong. 'Cause beef, for what it's worth, is the greatest meat on earth. You wouldn't say your roast is just a meal.
I'm so sorry.
That's like saying Australia too had just a keel. Not just a smile from a babe, just that beetroot for a fave. Not just a bridge or a stand, not just a greatest southern land. You see, when you use a word like just, you get just what you deserve. So choose your next words carefully when I ask what you'd prefer.
A rump steak, please?
Great choice. Coming right up.
'Cause beef, for what it's worth, is the greatest meat on earth. Our beef's the greatest meat on earth.
How long have we been away for, by the way? Because I'm double parked.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And we did taste some of the greatest meat on earth at lunchtime, and I hope you all had plenty. We've got one of the best ambassadors for beef and lamb and goat in Sam Burke, and he's so passionate about the product, and he's so good with the product. It's a real credit to him and his team, the way that he serves the product up and the enthusiasm he has for every meal and every occasion he has with it. So, well done, Sam. My name's Alistair Watson. I'm a member of the MLA board. I was voted on the board last year, and I'm pleased to be back here today. Just one note for the audience. Can you please turn your phones off? Or if they do go on, pass it to your neighbour to the left and let them play with it for 30 seconds. This event has also been streamed live online at mla.com.au and through MLA's Facebook and Twitter platforms. To those joining us online, a special welcome to you too. Don't forget that you can join the conversation via text. Please see instructions below the video. Meat and Livestock Australia is a red meat and livestock industry research, development and marketing service provider. It's a public company limited by guarantee, funded by levy payers, the Australian Government and value chain. Oh. We've got our first culprit. Funded by levy payers, the Australian Government and value chain partners for the purpose of fostering the long-term prosperity of the Australian red meat and livestock industry. And fostering prosperity is the theme of this year's program. The topics to be covered by our expert speakers stretch across the red meat value chain, starting with an expert analysis of current global demand trends and then examining the implications for our Australian industry from farm gate through to the consumer's plate. Every day, MLA is collaborating with stakeholders to invest in research, development and marketing initiatives that contribute to improving the profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness of the industry, its producers and their value chain partners. This investment, worth more than $267 million this financial year, is supporting an enormous body of work that is all directed to achieving the objectives of the MISP 2020. In this afternoon's session, we're joined by some of the members of MLA's management team who are going to report to you on some of this work and how it's contributing to the industry's prosperity today, tomorrow and in the future. MLA's Chief Marketing and Communication Officer, Lisa Sharp, and we welcome Lisa today. Lisa's on maternity leave, and we congratulate her on the birth of her daughter 5 weeks ago. Well done, Lisa. Lisa will start the proceedings, and at that point where it all starts for our industry, with the consumer. She'll discuss how we position Australia to realise the opportunities and address the challenges of the increasingly competitive market and ever more discerning customer. She'll explain the mega trends that are driving consumer purchasing decisions and what they mean for our industry today and tomorrow. And she'll provide a glimpse of how MLA is using these insights and analysis to market our products and ensure consumers keep choosing Australian red meat both here and overseas. I'd like to welcome Lisa to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Alistair. So as Alistair mentioned, I'm lucky enough to be MLA's Chief Marketing and Communications Officer. And, in my role, at about 6 a.m. every morning, I scan my media alerts and I review what's making headlines. Not just what's making headlines in the red meat industry, but what's making headlines generally. What are the sorts of things that consumers are seeing when they wake up? And here's an example of the types of things I might typically see. Now, some of those headlines won't surprise you. Some might seem a little alarming, or perhaps you might just dismiss them as fads. But I'm not doing my job, and I'm not doing my job for you if I don't interrogate what's beneath those headlines. So today, a really quick look at global megatrends, just to help us make sense of those headlines and to understand what the implications are for the Australian red meat industry. There are 5 megatrends I'm going to look at, and the first of these is more from less. Now, the Earth, as we know, has limited supplies of natural resources, energy, water, food, and all these things are essential for human survival and for maintaining lifestyles. Now, numerous sets of data and research reveal that these resources are being depleted, and often at quite alarming rates. But at the same time, we've got population growth and income growth, and these are putting upward pressure on demand. This more from less megatrend explores how companies, governments, and communities are and will continue to find new ways of ensuring quality of life for current and future generations within the confines of those limited resources. Now, some of MLA's own data supports this megatrend. Consumers prefer natural meat. So what do I mean by that? A quality product that's been produced with minimal human intervention. And this desire for something truly natural, it's not just limited to the wealthy or developed nations. As the chart on my left, you can see, is a snapshot from our global tracker and highlights that around 1/5 of consumers across quite diverse markets at different stages of development are seeking natural meat, again, minimal human intervention. Consumers are also concerned about the human's impact on the environment, and these concerns are often closely linked to farming practice. Within our industry, areas where this trend is likely to impact, both positively and negatively, include efficiency and on-farm management, sustainable practices, yield from the animal, and that's leveraging everything that animal produces, including manure, and an overall shift to eating efficiency all the way through to managing plate waste. Organic food also forms part of this more from less trend, and the organic food market continues to grow, particularly in countries such as China, where consumers still have grave concerns around food safety. In addition, a 2016 report by Euromonitor notes a shift towards broader green-minded products, products with low food miles, or product raised without pesticides. And this is partly influenced by weakened economies and the fact that organic products are very, very expensive, but also people's consideration to wider social and ecological issues. They want to choose products that are not necessarily organic, but address their ecological and animal welfare concerns. And this takes me to my second megatrend, great expectations. This is a consumer, societal, demographic and cultural megatrend. It explores the rising demand for experiences over products and the rising importance of social relationships. And as part of this, these great expectations, consumers demand transparency. They expect companies to be honest and trustworthy and responsible, and indeed they have ways to expose those that are engaged in dishonest or unethical activities. This megatrend captures the expectation people have for more personalised products, services that meet their unique wants, needs, and indeed their values. And indeed these need also to be delivered en masse. This megatrend is seen in food by an ever-increasing number of food apps that help consumers know more and more about their food they're buying and who is producing them. Indeed, these expectations have been greatly enabled, nurtured and empowered by technology, smartphones in particular. Not only do these devices enable consumers to readily research and compare and contrast products, we're also seeing an increasing number of shoppers across a multitude of markets but purchasing groceries, including red meat, on their smartphones. And over recent years, there's been a steady increase in the number of consumers shopping online with their phone and tablets, and at the same time a modest decline in those using their laptops and desktops for such purchases. And launched in 2011 as a chat app, WeChat was initially seen as a Chinese version of Facebook and WhatsApp. This app has now become a hub for all internet activities, to research, to make purchases, and as a platform to find a myriad of services, hailing a taxi, paying a bill, securing a doctor's appointment. And while we're thinking about online purchasing, we're seeing real examples of consumers wanting and responding to transparency. In this very simple example, by displaying tubs of Ben and Jerry's ice cream with the lid off and making the variant bigger and easier to read, created a 3.6% sales uplift for Unilever. So the implications of this particular trend is how your product looks online and what your social media profile says about you can be just as important as the product, the physical product. Now this takes me to megatrend 3, the Silk Highway. Now the coming decades will see the world economy shift from west to east and north to south. Rapid income growth in Asia, and to a lesser extent South America and Africa, will see billions of people transitioning out of poverty and into the middle income classes. The powerhouses of this new world economy are China and India. This economic shift will build new export markets, trade relations, business models, and of course cultural ties for Australia. Now this is not a new trend. Indeed, by their very definition, global megatrends are long-term. So I thought I'd share a few slides on the markets and illustrate what this might mean for the Australian red meat industry in the near future. We have finite supplies of red meat, and as we heard Tom Maguire speak this morning, we are a small player when you think about the global production of red meat. And with that finite product, we need to identify the very best markets for us. And in assessing markets, one typically starts with population size. So what I have behind me is just a number of our key markets and just absolute population size. One particular market will stand out to you, and that's China, with a population of approximately or just under 1.4 billion. I'll also draw your attention to the US, Japan and Korea, 3 key markets for the Australian red meat industry. But of course, population alone is not enough. Realising the opportunity in any market is fundamentally linked to consumers' ability to purchase. Now, the correlation between income growth and protein consumption is well established, with various studies showing that US $35,000 per annum is the average household income at which discretionary products are purchased, and indeed protein, as part of that, is regularly consumed. And here are a number of households in any given country that meet that threshold, that US $35,000 per annum. You can actually see there are very few households here in China who could afford a product like imported beef or lamb. So today, our current key markets, markets like the US, Japan, Korea, remain very important and indeed very attractive for the Australian red meat industry. However, let's look at the pace of change. Same data again, number of households earning US $35,000 per annum in the year 2020. In just under 3 short years, the number of middle or higher income households in China will slightly exceed that of Korea and arguably almost double that of Australia. These are the households who can regularly afford popular proteins. So this Silk Road trend is real. It's very real, but it will take time to unfold. And last but not least, as we're looking at the markets, there is devil in the detail. Yes, we need to look at attractive countries, population and the number of households who can afford our product. But equally, it's about identifying those attractive cities. And in this particular data set, we're looking at gross domestic product per capita for selected cities, further identifying those locations with households with the potential to afford Australian red meat. By identifying these cities, we can better understand local market factors, such as the retail structure, the food service structure, competitive intensity, physical access, and of course, the humble consumer, and far from humble. By this I mean we want to understand local cuisine types. We want to understand what's on trend, what's on menu. We want to understand the cooking methods, the size of the kitchen, the size of the fridge, and ensuring all the time we're supplying the right cut in the right format. And what these few slides very simply illustrate is that, yes, income is set to rise, and in all likelihood, so too will the demand for popular proteins. But the emerging markets do take time to develop, so it remains equally as important to defend our mature markets and to continue to explore the profitable segments that are in those, whilst at the same time nurturing those newer markets. Megatrend number 4 is forever young. The ageing population is an asset, and Australia and many of the countries that make up the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, also have an ageing population. Elderly or ageing citizens provide a wealth of skills and knowledge. Nevertheless, there are some challenges associated with an ageing population and associated demographic trends. And one of these challenges is rapid growth in healthcare expenditure. In Australia, where almost 20% of our population is forecast to be over 65 years of age by 2025, expenditure patterns by household are also rapidly changing. Health-related expenditure is forecast to grow fastest, overtaking restaurant and hotel spend by 2020. And this is important. Restaurants and hotels are a very lucrative channel for Australian red meat, and indeed Australians are some of the highest spenders globally on eating out. So, something for us to think about. And our other major markets are also walking down this path with ageing populations. Japan, Korea, China, with some faster than others. The implication for us, we need to link red meat's brand image and messages with health. And we need to explore value-added opportunities, specifically targeting older and wealthier consumers. And this will become increasingly important in the years ahead. Megatrend number 5, fear, uncertainty and doubt. Now this particular trend started with the events of September 11. And just as we were beginning to regain our confidence, we had the global financial crisis hit. And we heard Anna Spears talk about this morning, but through the course of that global financial crisis, we started to lose confidence and indeed trust. We lost trust in governments and institutions. And last year's US election results used fear in the form of terrorism and xenophobia as a potent and winning message. And the Brexit push used a very similar strategy. And today, where are we? Well, there's daily references to fake news, and world leaders seem to mention that quite often. There are so many competing sources of information. What and who do you believe? Who do you trust? So with the world feeling somewhat out of control, individuals start to perhaps turn away from the big picture and they focus on what they can control. And typically this is everyday choices. And when it comes to food, they want to be confident in the choices they make. An example of this is a 2016 CSIRO study, which showed against a longer term trend that there is now an increasing number of consumers who are using pack labels to determine their purchase. A majority of 35% of participants felt that country of origin was the single most important piece of information now on a food label, more important than the ingredients panel and more important than nutritional claims. And this trend is evident in MLA's own consumer tracking. This is from our global tracker, with significant numbers of consumers in key markets looking first for country of origin labelling. So what's the implication for us? We need to continue to adhere to and promote our world-class integrity systems, our paddock-to-plate traceability, our food safety and certification, and promote our country of origin in export markets. For brand owners, consider perhaps a more specific regional or local paddock-to-plate story with emphasis on your controls right through the value chain. Now, you might be thinking, this is all very interesting, Lisa, but it all feels a bloody long way away, and does it really impact how consumers feel and how they act? So one last chart for you. Here's an example from Australia. This is a chart from our annual Community Sentiment Tracker, a study we've been running for the last 6 years. We ask a whole range of questions, but along the way we begin to find out if respondents are limiting red meat or eating less red meat. And if they are, we're keen to understand what is the single biggest reason why you're limiting your consumption of red meat. And in understanding that, we want to understand what the trend is. Now, it should come as no surprise that the line there at the top in dark blue, the biggest factor is price. Price, price, price. Beef and lamb in this country typically retails at a 4 times price per kilo premium to chicken. And in the environment of declining real wages, housing affordability, spiralling utility bills, for most households, every dollar counts. Now, health concerns remain the main reason for 24% of respondents, but we can see that actually is trending down in the last couple of years. But what I do want to draw your attention to is the yellow line, those consumers who are concerned about the treatment of animals. And for this group, 2% in 2010, 12% in 2016. This is the single biggest reason why they're limiting their consumption of red meat. And this does mirror trends we are seeing in other markets. Now, in Australia, women are typically more concerned about this than men, but they are often the main meal preparer, and if they're not, they have extraordinary influence over what is being prepared and what is being purchased. And as a result, we do see retailers actively promoting their sustainable practices, their sustainable sourcing, and their animal welfare credentials of the products they stock on shelf. So these megatrends suggest both threats and opportunities for Australian red meat. And demand is a factor of so many variables. We need to continue to monitor, reassess, adapt and innovate. And where required, reposition our product to realise opportunities and also realise those relative premiums for Australian beef and lamb. So back to those headlines where I started. Global megatrends around sustainability, uncertainty and great expectations, they're real. As part of this, the demand for natural product and protein is strong, and it's set to grow in both developed and developing markets. Equally, increasing numbers of consumers want to know more about the food they eat and where it comes from and who produces it, with technology and social media greatly enhancing their ability to research products and share their views and experiences. On matters around human nutrition, the environment and animal health and welfare, as an industry we must commit to sound industry policies, practices that demonstrate our adherence to those policies, and have programs in place to support best practice right throughout the value chain. All of these things, policies, practices, programs, underpin global market access, and that underpins demand for our product. Australian red meat, in my mind, is incredibly well positioned to meet consumer needs. We must, however, be equally ready to address consumer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to have all the data, but if the data without insights doesn't mean a lot. So it's great that we've got a team that now is putting a lot of insights together and giving us an opportunity to understand what the consumer's really after out there and which consumers to target. I'd now like to invite Dr. Jane Weatherly, Chief Executive Officer of the Integrity Systems Company, a subsidiary of MLA, which has been charged with the remit of streamlining the management of Australians' traceability and quality assurance programs for beef, sheep meat and goat meat. While consumers look for higher levels of product assurance, our red meat industry is facing relentless competition from low-cost global suppliers and other proteins. Meanwhile, digital technology and data science are rapidly advancing, as we heard at breakfast this morning. Jane will discuss how the Integrity Systems Company is harnessing the power of data to strengthen our industry's integrity and traceability systems and protect Australia's precious global reputation for the clean, safe and natural red meat. Welcome, Jane.
Yes, I'll laugh, I have a step. It's a joke every year. So welcome everyone, it's so great to see you all here and thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Today I'm not going to give you the traditional presentation about our integrity systems and the operations that have been happening throughout the year. Mainly because it was touched on certainly at the MLA Forum by our peak industry councils this morning, but we've also been running over 60 workshops across the country about all of that with over 5,500 producers with our stakeholders as well. So we'll continue to be doing that well into the new year. Today is all about the big picture for our integrity systems programs and really focusing on why they are so incredibly important to our industry, with a focus on how we're moving towards better utilisation of the data that we have to ultimately strengthen our integrity systems and also try to take some of the pain out of managing compliance. So just firstly, the Integrity Systems Company. So we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia. The company, which was formerly NLIS Limited, commenced in early 2017 as a result of the Safe Meat Initiatives Review, which recommended that all the integrity systems program be managed under one company. So we now manage NLIS, we also manage the National Vendor Declarations, and since March this year we've also managing the Livestock Production Assurance Program, which we took carriage of from AusMeat. Our role is now to streamline and strengthen our integrity systems programs to ensure Australia's strong reputation for the best red meat in the world is retained, through making sure that they're underpinned by the best integrity systems in the world as well. In terms of our governance structures, we certainly operate with our own board and are provided advice and direction by various industries committees made up of our peak industry councils as well as Safe Meat partners, the federal and state governments as well. But what's this big fizz about data? Everyone's talking about it, it's a major theme this morning. So data is its own economy now. It's everything we do in life, it is likely that data is being collected by someone as a result. So when you're doing your shopping and you have your frequent shopper card, it's all about tracking your purchases and understanding your preferences so that they can target their marketing. There is a volume of data that is generated every day around the world in quantities that we just cannot quantify at all. So for our industry perspective, harnessing data, putting data to good use and making it accessible to our industry to be able to ramp up our efficiency and performance is going to be a fundamental component to our survival. Data is being generated and provided up and down the supply chain as we speak through systems such as Livestock Data Link and also MyMSA. And even more data is going to be coming with the implementation of our DEXA systems and also objective measurement overall. So from a private good perspective, for our individual producers, data can be viewed as a key profit driver if we start to use it effectively. And from an industry good perspective, data is power in understanding the performance of our supply chain, using it to verify our product claims, understand our consumer trends in terms of their needs and wants. And let's just move now to have a little bit more about that particular focus. So MLA has been collecting consumer market insights for a very long time, as demonstrated by Lisa's fantastic presentation. But to start our journey, the first constellation of data that we're going to have a look at is how consumer insight data helps to inform the direction of our integrity systems program. Over the duration of what remains for this presentation is the aim to try and help join the dots associated with the data that we have, what we currently do with it now, and what we could be doing it within the future. So keep an eye out for each of these little constellations as we go along, as the picture builds. So to start, and building on some of the great information that Lisa presented already, we know from the data collected about our consumers around the world that they absolutely care about where their meat's coming from. So we need to be clearly differentiated and maintain our considerable reputation for being safe to eat and ethically and sustainably produced. This is what our integrity systems provide to our customers. Interestingly, it's Korea, the Middle East and Japan that are very focused on and aware of where their country of origin of their food is. Now, with regard to this particular data, it's taken from around 8,000 consumers from around the world in 12 countries. It's a massive, massive body of work from MLA that informs a multitude of our marketing activities. It's robust, it's juicy, and it tells us incredible insights into, and we are particularly fortunate to be able to have access to it. Now, just building on that even further, the consumer data also tells us that they are very clear on the attributes on which that are important for their protein choice. So as you can see, food safety, quality and sustainability are important characteristics for consumers in these 4 countries. It is our integrity systems that offer this promise and the key to our consumers and their buying choice. Importantly, these attributes are also considered by consumers overseas to be held within our own beef products. So the ability to demonstrate that our beef is guaranteed to be safe, is environmentally sustainable and ethically produced is what our integrity systems of LPA, NLAS and MVDs provide. What we don't do is have great big brands of these integrity systems programs plastered all over our products overseas. And that's because these requirements come into play at the trade negotiation tables. They are stipulated as requirements, and by and large, the 3 components of this constellation is what I'll focus on now. So importantly, I guess it's really about our export market. Australia enjoys enviable access to our international markets, and I guess most of Australia's markets require or are moving towards requiring suppliers to have robust mandatory livestock traceability systems. The industry integrity programs assist Australia in meeting these requirements to help underpin market access for all these red meat export places. Now, the data presented here is all about the major markets around the world which we enjoy because of our integrity systems. Ultimately, what the integrity systems provide is the ability for government to underpin certification to a number of our major export destinations. So without these integrity systems in place, we wouldn't have these markets, which last year was exported around 963 kilotons of ship weight, which was a value of over $7 billion. So to put a bit more substance around those 3 key areas then, of traceability, guaranteeing our product safety and wholesomeness product, and ensuring that there is an ability to transfer food safety information throughout the supply chain. Traceability is the thing that most importing countries are requiring to make sure that there's traceability from the farm gate, from where the animal was last managed, right through to post-mortem inspection. In some cases, they're also expecting the full animal's lifetime information. So our NLA system, where we work alongside with our jurisdictions, is what enables us to really deliver on this requirement. In terms of the second area, so there are requirements for animals to be sourced from holdings that can guarantee the wholesomeness of the derived product, a requirement consistent with the Australian government standards. The export processing sector are compliant with this requirement if they source animals from properties with an on-farm food safety program, and LPA is the way that this is achieved. The third and final area is about transferring information through the supply chain, and essentially through the use of our NVD system, this requirement for food safety information is met. Now, we are fortunate as a country to have a national system. So one system that our industry has put in place that supports this exceptional access for Australian red meat export markets. And we need to ensure that we're continually enhancing and ensuring that we're retaining our reputation that we enjoy around the world. So all our integrity systems are underpinned by data from 4 key areas at the moment, which is NLAS, the LPA program, EDEX, and also MVDs. So it's this data that provides the evidence and verifies our claims against a safe and ethically produced product that we sell. So just to focus on the NLAS and the LPA databases. Currently, the NLAS database contains information around 185 million tags, and this includes 75 million active devices and 110 million inactive devices, which are essentially animals that have been processed or exported. In total, since the program started in 1999, there are 325 animal movements that have been recorded on that database, with around 30 to 50 million new movements recorded every year. Within the LPA database, we have around 220,000 records or accredited property identification codes. On average, this grows by about 8,000 new records every year, and every year we also conduct 2,000 random audits with our producers to test compliance on farm. These databases also include a huge amount of other information which is incredibly valuable to industry, such as the types of livestock that are moving, health and disease status, movements, and also carcass and feedback information through MSA. So what's actually contained there is a huge body of information that is incredibly valuable to industry. But I guess what we need to do is really understand these strengths, which what it certainly delivers is it does underpin those market requirements. The sheer quantity and quality of the data that we have verifies the system that we have. It is still rated as the best traceability system in the world, but obviously our competitors are catching up. And importantly, it's very much whole of industry owned and supported, which is also an incredibly important component to it all. And it does provide our point of difference, which is a point that Don made this morning. The opportunities, though, that these data sets hold for industry is really unknown at the moment, but we do know that there's huge potential. So looking at ways that we can link and extend the purpose of the data that we've got, make sure that it's more accessible and used and shared across our supply chain. Look at different ways that we can automate data uploading systems and different analytics that happens in the background. Utilise that data to really make sure that we tell our story in a lot more detail to what we're doing now. And also use it to help inform industry decisions and also analyse our industry performance. But when all the stars align and the dots are joined, essentially they form the role of the Integrity Systems Company and what it's all about for industry. And that is getting back to streamlining and making sure we're strengthening our integrity systems. To do that, we capitalise on these opportunities at hand, and we can look at where we can use data systems, technology, and analytics to more effectively underpin our integrity systems and try to see how we can take the pain out of compliance. At the moment, the system is strong, but it's hugely reliant on a lot of paperwork, a lot of record keeping, things like farm mats and biosecurity plans, which is all time consuming and adds a lot to the never-ending list of things that producers need to be doing. So the Integrity Systems Company is very aware of this, as is the broader industry. And while we need to maintain the current system and continue to strengthen it, we also need to get smarter in how we're using this industry data to find better ways with industry of taking out the manual, heavy labour nature of it. So, one of the opportunities that we talked about just before was about looking at how we might link other data sources, because none of it's really linked at the moment. They're all still very focused on their original purpose of why they were developed. So what might it look like if we could link all the data movement, the movement data that we have, all the production data that we might have, genetics, carcass feedback, etc. What might that be able to do for industry? So examples of this that we have access to, the R&D, some of the R&D that we conduct, and that there's considerable animal production data that's there, growth rates, pasture growth rates, even looking at smart ear tag devices, GPS tracking. All of those have data points that we're starting to collect now. Other systems that we have is the Livestock Data Link program, which contains carcass data, animal health data, with around 104 million records that we currently have in the system. And the data that Meat Standards Australia contains is quite extraordinary. So it's eating quality data with 47 million records and growing rapidly. So what might the future state look like if we develop a platform that enables all this data to be linked, to be compatible so that it can talk to each other and generate clever automated analytics for the benefit of industry? This could deliver an unknown amount of benefits, but in the first take, and the obvious ones, are potentially the accelerated supply chain performance because we have more data and sophisticated analytics to identify where we need to improve. Greater transparency because we have more data to verify our claims. Faster real-time market intelligence. So instead of waiting a week for feedback or market information, you might get it on a daily basis. And giving greater detail in the story that we tell our consumers overseas about the product that we're producing. And one day, possibly, hopefully in the not too distant future, but maybe it's a little bit unrealistic, but possibly a system that doesn't require any human requirement to do any paperwork for our traceability systems because we have extremely sophisticated technology on farm with sensors and GPS tracking and all of that does the measurements and sends the data automatically into a database. But as with most things, there's a lot of work to be done. And in the first instance, we really need to define what that value proposition is for industry to actually go down this line in the first place. So I guess there's also an issue, and trust has been a major theme right throughout the day, is how do we actually look to generate greater trust across the supply chain around how we collectively manage data and look to how we really drive that data-driven culture. If industry does move towards a far greater focus on data, we need to work with industry to really define those data standards and what the access and sharing standards might be. So it can't be just an open slather where everyone accesses everything. There's going to need to be rules and agreed across the supply chain. But we also have considerable work to be done in terms of R&D. And the first and foremost obvious thing is dealing with that great issue of connectivity. And Sean Starling is definitely on that mission, and he's head on into trying to find solutions quickly for industry. And with that, we need to understand the type of data platform that we need to set up with a functionality that meets the needs of what industry requires, including data sets that will talk to each other and also enable robust analysis. So to finish up, I guess it is incredibly exciting what the possibilities are with data for our industry, even beyond our integrity systems. So data does underpin our reputation and trust that we have built for our industry and the verification of our claims that our product is safe and ethically produced. Our integrity systems do remain critical to underpin our $23 billion industry through giving us that market access and meeting the needs of our customers. However, we do need to ensure that we continue strengthening these programs while at the same time finding ways to take the pain out of compliance for our producers. There are significant opportunities to start and explore and to capitalise on the data systems and technology we have available. However, ultimately, what we will need to do is work with industry to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Data is really important. Data gives us integrity. Integrity opens up markets, gives us access. That should give us better value, and it will meet customer and consumer requirements and needs going forward. I think although at times it's onerous, we should never take for granted our customers' requirements and what we have got over and above most of our competitors. So thank you, Jane. I'd now like to invite Michael Crowley, MLA's General Manager of Producer Consultation and Adoption, to the stage. Michael will build on what you've heard from Lisa as to what's happening in the markets and from Jane as to how industry's integrity systems are being streamlined to underpin the presentation of your products to consumers. He'll explore some of the opportunities for you to invest on farm to meet the needs of consumers today and tomorrow with a focus on eating quality programs, genetics, and objective measurement to increase on-farm productivity or eating quality, and market compliance. Finally, while it's critical to understand our consumers to have the traceability and quality assurance they demand, and to be producing a product to the end on farm, it matters little if we have not got a competitive value chain. Michael.
Thanks very much, Alistair. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I think the real key theme for me this afternoon is how are our investments today shaping the future? And without putting the consumer in clear line of sight in everything that we do, are we really going to achieve that additional value? Because the consumer is the only one putting money into the chain. So if we meet or exceed consumer expectations, they're willing to pay for it. And we're asking consumers to pay more than they ever have for our product. And so we can't afford to let them down on quality. So that's really the key theme for me through today's presentation. So what I'm going to take you through is what are those consumer expectations? We'll have a look into the future and see if we can crystal ball what that future looks like and how are we going to get there, as well as where are the investments today and where are we heading with our key program investments around Meat Standards Australia, around objective measurement technology, and then through our livestock genetics investments as well, and we'll bring the whole value chain together. So starting off with the consumer, we really need to understand what those consumer expectations are. And if we look forward to 2025 and we think about what are the expectations of a consumer going forward, well, they're going to be purchasing our product based on a meal outcome. They're looking for an occasion and they're purchasing for that occasion. And they're going to want to know who produced that product, how are those animals raised, where did it come from, and what was the quality of that product, what was its sustainability credentials, what interventions were used in its production, so what were the treatments provided to that animal, for example. So we need to think about how we translate that information through our production system to meet those consumer needs. So when we start looking at our objective carcass measurement technology, and we look at the dual energy X-ray that will give us meat, bone and fat, so we'll have a yield estimate, a yield measurement there prior to animals being boned out. We can then also match the quality and get the balance right between quality and yield. And we'll also then be able to overlay the brand specifications and make a brand promise to a consumer that we've then delivered through having more precision in our yield as well as optimising quality, and then the brands themselves can differentiate their promise and capture that value from the consumer dollar. So we're creating the opportunity through those investments, creating the opportunity for producers to get paid on the value of the livestock that they produce. And then when we actually translate those objective measurements, we also need to improve market specification compliance. One of the biggest costs to our industry are animals that we've cared for the whole lives, and then we send them into the market and they fail to meet the specifications, and they cost the industry, the whole value chain, a lot of money. Then when we get into breeding our animals to those market specifications, so we need to get a very good handle on the information that we receive today, because there's more information coming in the future. And one of our challenges is making sure we're packaging that information that is useful and that you can make decisions from that information. So we need to get a handle on what the data is today, so that as more information comes, it's less disruptive in your own businesses and you can understand and better connect with your customers and ultimately what the consumer wants. And then DNA testing will become routine, and we're going to have cheaper, more affordable, cost-effective genomics. And I guess I'm going to unpack that a little bit more to understand how all that fits together. So then Meat Standards Australia plays a critical role in bringing all of these things together. And in partnership with industry, we developed a 5-year plan in 2015. We're now at the midpoint of that plan. And what we're looking to achieve through that plan is making all Australian beef cattle eligible for MSA grading by 2020. If we can have all animals eligible, it means that if the industry choose to grade them, we can predict the consumer outcome from all cuts from every carcass and appropriately position those cuts to their best end market outcome. And that might be going into a manufacturing box, but it also might be lifting the value of some cuts that are currently undervalued and making sure that we're also segregating our better end product and targeting those consumers who are willing and prepared to pay for it and who will come back and thank us for it. By 2020, we want to be grading 50% of the national adult cattle slaughter. Whilst every animal will be eligible, we're realistic about taking the industry on a journey and increasing the percentage of our production that we grade. We're also making sure that we have the research to underpin our promise to have an eating quality grade for every cut of every carcass graded, so we can appropriately match the fitness for purpose, the best outcome for all cuts. We're working with brand owners to deliver MSA into the trade. The brand owners create value, so we get paid on weight, but quality creates value, and brands themselves can actually differentiate themselves even further through their brand messaging. As brands get closer to consumers, they capture more value. So we're working with brand owners and we're positioning MSA as a quality system. It was never designed as a brand, and we're now working on marketing MSA as a quality system, underpinning brands. So when brands go into international markets, we won't be doing generic advertising of MSA. We'll be the trademark, and protecting the integrity of the trademark in international markets is really important. And brand owners making an eating quality promise to whatever market they supply, they can underpin that with the science of MSA, and it's a system that will underpin what they are promising in their brands. The growth of MSA will come from international markets, and I'll talk about the strategies we're implementing to enable that growth to happen in our international markets. We're looking at objective measurement technologies both in the chiller and on farm to give you the tools that you need to improve market spec compliance, give you real-time information, and to manage animals that are both suitable and not suitable for consignment prior to you sending them in and finding out later on through your feedback that they weren't what your customer wanted. So how are we going? How are we tracking against the plan? Well, MSA turns 20 next year, so we've got 20 years now of commercial operation around MSA. And as you can see over the years, the adoption has increased significantly. And the yellow line is the percentage of national adult cattle slaughter over time. So whilst the MSA grading numbers dipped a bit in 16-17, remembering we've come off those record slaughter years, and the 16-17 slaughter numbers around 7 million head, we have actually graded 40% of our national adult cattle slaughter, up from 38% the year before. So the percentage-wise, we're trending in the right direction. But what will create the next level of growth is what I'm going to touch on in a little bit more time. So then from a sheep point of view, we have an MSA program for our sheep meat, and the lambs, we're now grading 25% of our lambs are following that pathway. Of those lambs that are graded, of the 5.7 million lambs that were presented for grading, 70% of those lambs are now being marketed under MSA licensed brands. That's been a significant growth in the volume of lamb now being promoted as MSA into the trade. An objective measurement technology in lamb is really going to help us because we have a cuts-based model ready to go for lamb, but we need an objective measure to measure IMF, intramuscular fat, at chain speed in our lamb plants, and we can deliver a cuts-based model and take out those really top-end cuts and extract more value out of our lamb production. But we need technology to solve that for us. The benefits of producing MSA cattle, we track this over time, and this is a graph that we chart through the National Livestock Reporting Service, and this is comparing MSA YG cattle to non-MSA YG. And I think we'll start to change the way in which we report these numbers, but this is a bit of a health check to say, are the price differentials still there for MSA despite the prices increasing and market volatility? And even in 16-17, there was 23 cents a kilo price differential between MSA and non-MSA in the same category for non-feedlot cattle, and 11 cents a kilo for feedlot cattle. And that was a direct benefit of $130 million just in that 12-month period paid back to producers. But there's a greater opportunity on the horizon, which I'll get to in just a moment. So when we then start looking at what's changing in our industry and what's going to help us drive growth and how we're going to take MSA to the next level, well, the beef language white paper with its 46 recommendations has created the opportunity for our industry to prepare for that future. One of the first outcomes of that review that has been adopted and endorsed by industry has been the inclusion of an eating quality graded cipher in the language. And that's in addition to the language. It doesn't replace any language. However, what it does create is the opportunity for us to pack product based on eating quality before we apply any dentition categories, and dentition doesn't impact on eating quality. We've got over 100,000 consumers who've eaten over 700,000 individual samples of beef that tell us over the last 25 years of research that dentition doesn't impact on eating quality. Now our language enables us to pack on outcome first. So if we look at the scenario of MSA eligible 4 and 6 teeth cattle that over the last 12 months were consigned and they graded MSA and they met company specifications, there were still price differences, and I'm talking about MSA price differences, for MSA 4 teeth cattle being 5 cents less than the YG and 30 cents a kilo the 6 teeth, and yet the index outcomes would have met those brand specifications. So I ran a scenario and said, just within that 12-month period, what would have been the gross industry benefit if we could have packed that product on outcome first without downgrading those animals? Well, here it is. There's nearly an extra $10 million of value for producers. The processor, brand owner, wholesaler, that middle bit of the supply chain, an extra $16 million. And based on our retail price differentials, there's another $20 million additional at retail. It's close to $50 million of lost opportunity. So what a great incentive for the whole supply chain, the whole industry to get behind it. For us as an MSA team, we're pretty excited about it because we've already got commercial companies who have adopted it. There's product going into international markets being marketed under EQG, and we can reinvigorate the program and engage with those supply chains and work with producers and brand owners to make sure we can evolve our industry very, very quickly. This is a game changer. The other big change in the program has been around the removal of meat colour as an MSA requirement. We're not saying that meat colour isn't important to consumers, but what our research showed was that the colour at grading and the colour at retail changed. Colours tended to get lighter. The colour at grading, and we're measuring that in one muscle, relating to the colour at retail in other muscles is a very poor relationship. But what we continue to show is that pH is a determinant of eating quality. So provided pH is below 5.71, then we're not compromising the consumer in any way. So that's a big game changer. So then the growth within international markets, we've developed guidelines for exporters. MSA is one of only 2 programs outside of the US that is USDA process verified. MSA exporters into the US can use the USDA logo on that product and get recognition from US consumers that that's been endorsed by the USDA. And so we're working with brand owners and we're sub-licensing brands into international markets, and we'll see that growth, and I'll keep a very close eye and report back on that growth over time. I'll quickly move through our objective measurement technologies, and you've heard a lot about DEXA over the last 12 months, and we're making sure that we're also looking at objective measures around eating quality measures. We're looking at hyperspectral cameras that can measure marbling, ribeye area, fat colour, meat colour. Those devices, when they first came out, were around $400,000. They're coming down in price, I think something like $40,000 now for installation. But then there are cheaper devices as well. The Nix Colour Sensor, which was developed by 2 guys in Canada whose mother was an interior designer, and she wanted something to match paint colours. You can sit this device on a ribeye, it'll give you an instant readout of colour. It's retailing for $500. So the technology is moving very quickly. We're working with Meat Image Japan with their cameras to measure. They're really focused on marbling, but it can do ribeye area, meat colour, fat colour as well. So we can, we've got a range of devices in action. On farm, we're looking at can we measure and identify individual animal responses to stress. So dark cutters, high pH cattle being the biggest cost to our industry. So we're looking at these thermal imaging cameras, and you can see that in this video the eye is less prone to change in ambient temperature, so we can measure the temperature of the eye. You can see where those animals are rubbing against each other, where it's red and hotter. We can measure temperature. We're also looking at devices, similar camera technology, looking at temperature, respiration rate and heart rate. And we've measured these animals, around 800 head on King Island and Tasmania, measured them on farm. We've had some cattle go direct consignment, some mixed. They went across on a boat. Some were rested before slaughter, some straight to slaughter. We replicated that through sale yards direct consignment, rested after sale yard, direct consignment from sale yard, and took these measures on farm, on boat, sale yard and at plant. All of that product was collected going through consumer sensory testing. We'll have results early next year, and we'll see whether any of those indicators that we found in these animal behaviours give us any insights into being able to identify those individual animals, remove them and manage them separately before we consign them. Wouldn't that be a fantastic outcome? The final section for me is around genetics. We're just now on the 12-month anniversary of forming the National Livestock Genetics Consortium. So to remind you of the priorities of that consortium around world-leading R&D, what we're asking our researchers to do when we're commissioning R&D is that we're setting baselines on what our genetic progress is, and our goals are around doubling the annual rate of genetic gain. We're looking at working with the best minds in the business, and we've got them around the table on the task force. We're looking at disruptive technologies. I've already mentioned cheap genomic tests. We're moving towards, we're asking all project applicants to make their project IP available to contribute to multi-breed analysis. We're looking at cultural change around genetics, how we value genetics. We're looking at, I've just employed an adoption manager for genetics who's not a geneticist. It's a breath of fresh air. He's getting plenty of advice from geneticists, but it's really around proof of profit, positioning genetics in the whole farm system approach, and making sure we're working back and making sure our genetic selection decisions also are improving what we can deliver through to consumers. We're creating the opportunity for industry to have seamless transfer of information. We're asking project IP to go into an accessible data platform. And we're creating the rules around that data access, and that's going to really create opportunities for us to be more collaborative, to work with new partners that we haven't worked with before. When projects are coming together, there's producers, researchers and commercialisers involved in those conversations, and we're working on creating that collaborative environment around genetics going forward. One of the biggest priorities we have at the moment is matching our genetic selection decisions to consumer outcomes. And genomics plays a key role in that, because if we can predict and understand what consumers want and link our slaughter feedback back from commercial animals back in through to the seed stock sector, and we've got our reference populations that are the best well-managed and well-measured animals, it's a bit of a game changer for us. So that might sound like a bit of a pipe dream, but we've got a project that's approved that we're working on getting it contracted at the moment, where if we can genotype 100,000 commercial carcasses with enough decent quality around the management groups and enough information around pedigree and performance, that we can then have enough linkage to the rest of the MSA graded cattle within that year. So it's not that far away. And that's how the Irish got started. So anyway, that's a bit of a snapshot of where we're going. And here we've got the supermarket of the future. So when we start to consider that future that I started, this is actually happening. This is the Co-op supermarket chain, a Danish company that have got over 1,500 supermarkets in Europe. They've developed a concept supermarket which they've recently opened in Milan. Now they're trying to create an experience. They're not wanting people just to come in and shop. They want to connect, and they want to give consumers what they need. So what they've done is, when you walk into the supermarket, above the shelves, they've reorganised the whole supermarket. Above the shelves they have screens. And those screens, when you go and pick up the produce, or you walk over and it tells you where was that product from. In the fresh produce section, you can hold up, I had an image of a lady picked up a bit of fennel and held it up, and it said what pesticides and herbicides and fertilisers were used in the production of that vegetable. And think about that from, what do we need around our red meat? Are we going to be in a position in 7 years' time where a consumer can walk in and pick up a piece of red meat in a tray and it tell you who produced it, where was it from, what was the quality, what was its sustainability, what's its footprint, and all of the information that consumers are asking for? So I think that's, and this is a company that, they're really looking at that, expanding that technology. This is the concept store. It's open now, and so if you're travelling in Europe, it might be worth a look. But I think this is really where we're heading with, trying to meet consumer demands into the future. Thanks, Alistair.
Thanks, Michael. Some exciting stuff there. I think one of the things that we all want is we all want consumers to pay more for our products. And we can all accept at the moment that our red meat is dearer than what it was a few years ago, and we want it to remain high. We've got a perfect system with MSA to guarantee quality to our customers and consumers. And if we can do that with all products, they will pay more. It's only expensive if it doesn't eat very well. Our next speaker is Sean Starling. Sean is the General Manager of Research, Development and Innovation, and he'll round out the presentations with his address on how MLA is investing in innovation to improve processing efficiency and drive productivity gains across the supply chain. Sean will report on the rollout of DEXA, Objective Carcass Measurement Technology, which Richard announced last year at the AGM, MLA's latest R&D investments, and what's ahead, including an exciting new initiative to engage producer groups in innovation. Sean.
Thank you, Alistair, and thank you, everybody. So last year when I stood in this space, but in a different location in Australia, we gave lots of videos about what we thought we'd be working on the current 12 months that we've just finished. So we thought we'd recap on some of that and do also a similar session on what might we be working on for the next 12 months. And we'll also just capture on the number of commercial companies that are engaging through the donor company and investing in our industry, because they're seeing it as an attractive place to invest in development at the moment, which is really exciting. So last year there was a few more topics than this, but in essence 4 topics that we've done some work on. So some work in food safety, unmanned solutions, drones, DEXA systems and augmented reality. I'm not going to talk about augmented reality today. There's a few examples next door. You can go and have a look at some of that yourself. So let's start with food safety. Can anyone remember a video that looked like this?
Engage, 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 engage.
So this is a piece of equipment the American military's got to really repel people without killing them. Maybe it's a good solution for the deer question this morning. In essence, it's a fancy microwave, and in some ways it's no different, but it is different than your microwave at home. So you know when you cook food at home in your microwave, sometimes you eat in the middle and it's cold because you haven't given it enough time, but then the outside's hot. So microwaves do not heat up uniformly through the distance. And the wavelengths we've got in microwaves lets us at least cook meat or cook food a fair way through. So this system that we're looking at has a different wavelength, and the concept is for a very short period of time, 5 to 10 milliseconds, you can heat up very fast the external temperature and ideally not denature that protein. So our thinking here is if we can actually apply this to any raw meat before we pack it, whether that be trim or a primal going into a cryovac bag, we'll be able to put out very, very safe product, guarantee it, and maybe extend shelf life for fresh offerings. This is where we're doing the R&D, so we're actually on this journey. We still don't know if it's going to work yet, but this is a laboratory in America. This actually is a laboratory that does this for laminating glass. So looking at bulletproof cars, high-speed jets and spacecraft. So that's what this facility is used for. And they're letting us take some meat and some microorganisms in there. That's the equivalent of what's inside that Humvee, and we're giving it a shot. So we're actually on the journey with that one. Drones and unmanned vehicles. There's petrol drones, there's battery drones, there's land drones, there's aerial drones, there's tethered systems like you see at sports stadiums. There's images from satellites. There's a bucket load of stuff out there. So what our role is to try and work with solution providers to help them actually deploy that know-how to this industry and make sure we get some use out of it, but also work with producers to understand why would you want one. And most importantly, and they're definitely not an example of the people we've got next door, but make sure that when someone's coming and talking to you about a drone, they actually, or you can ask the right questions to say, am I going to get value for money from this? And the example next door of Aerodyne, and you had those guys out on the tour yesterday. So we're working with those guys very, very closely to say if we don't get these systems to be fully autonomous in the next 2 or 3 years, you guys will probably lose interest in it anyway. So Aerodyne's a company we're working with. Some of you saw them yesterday on the farm. Our aim with that company is to make sure that whatever these systems can do for us, it's what we call a silent service. So they just go and do it in the backyard and report if they've got a problem. The other video I showed last year was a video of that image up there, which is a military device. So for the last 12 months, we've been working with that company, and they're also represented outside, HDT, to convert it into what we call an agricultural prototype. This is a system undergoing military trials in the US a few months ago to try and pass their stringent testing conditions. And for last week, or all of last week, myself and a couple of guys from HDT, Kent's still here next door, was travelling around northern Western Australia talking to producers about, well, we've been able to convert this platform from military to a more of an ag appeal looking thing. What should we do with it next? So we've got lots of ideas. We'd like to hear some more if you're going next door after this. And over the next 12 months, we'll actually start to implement some of those ideas. And our plan was to have this on farm yesterday and have it here today, but we've had a disagreement with our import agency about what dirty and clean means. So unfortunately, it's not going to get here. So this thing's diesel, it's electric, can run for a couple hundred kilometres. You can put extra diesel into it and get 1,000 kilometres out of it. So we're just starting to work out how do we deploy that now for industry. You've heard a lot about DEXA. Last year, Richard announced that we were going to work with industry to roll out DEXA as widely as we possibly could. What I thought I'd do this year, just to keep it in the forefront of our minds, is just run a video on how what DEXA is and how it's being used in the health and the fitness sector.
DEXA stands for Dual Energy X-ray Absorptiometry. So in essence, it provides a very low energy X-ray to measure 3 separate tissues, muscle, bone and fat tissue. And it measures those tissues down to 1/10 of a gram. So not only for the whole body, but also we can look at regional changes in composition. So DEXA provides a really useful tool to measure change over time. And that's the most important thing that we're after from our health and fitness program, whether it be a dietary stimulus or a strength and conditioning program. We want to measure changes in fat mass and we want to see changes in muscle mass as opposed to just standing on the scales.
So what are we doing with our industry? We've taken that medical system, which is common know-how out there. We've effectively turned it on its side, and you've seen an example of one of these out there with the Nutex solution. And we put some shielding around it. So that's what we're trying to roll out to this industry. Now, I did say to my boss that I was going to suggest we all have a raffle and understand what his lean meat yield was, and he said if I suggested that I wouldn't have a job next year. So I probably don't have to deliver on this now because I won't be presenting next year by the sounds of it, so that's okay. Where are we up to in the rollout? We've got 15 plants currently costed. 4 plants either have it installed or are being installed, and we've got another 4 contracts or 4 plants contracting as we speak. We're undergoing some live animal scanning as well to understand, can we take it from just carcass use to live animal use? And industry's keeping me honest. So we've got 2 committees. We've got an R&D committee and an adoption commercialisation committee that are giving me guidance on how we get this out. So we're on the journey. We're not as fast as I'd like to be, but most things aren't in life for me. So what are we going to do in the next 12 months? Here's the 4 areas that I'd like to cover off. So you've heard Mick and Jane talk about advanced measurement systems. I'm going to give you a couple of videos of some other things that we're working on, or hopefully working on over the next 12 months. Connectivity has become a really, really important issue and becoming more and more important, as Jane mentioned. What else we got up there? Processor efficiency. There's no point us being really, really efficient if we lose efficiency through the rest of the supply chain. So Someone mentioned this morning, it might have been either Anna or Tom, we've got to get all our measurement systems balanced and coordinating and talking to each other. Let's not drive one trait at the cost of another trait. So at MLA, we've got a fairly detailed program, and here's a simple depiction of it to show that we're actually working in lots of measurement spaces. And what I'm going to talk about now is how can we get CT if it works out into our industry, and this is the area that CT is likely to impact. Animal health measurements, eating quality, and helping us do advanced deboning tasks. So the aviation baggage system uses CT extensively, and you've got a system out there from UTEC which you can have a look at. That's a live system that's running. The aviation sector is really trying to up the ante on how much they scan our baggage, and here's a bit of an introductory video of what they're thinking about subjecting all of us to as we start to fly in the future out of America. And then on the back of this is a video of us actually starting to scan some meat through one of these systems.
TSA is testing new baggage scanners that are supposed to make flying safer. The 3D images they create also mean passengers won't have to remove laptops or liquids. The scanners use computed tomography instead of X-rays that traditional baggage scanners rely on. American Airlines partnered with the TSA to test the technology. They'll start in Phoenix and Boston.
So here's a video of meat going through one of the UTEC systems. And our trick obviously is to work out with what we can see, can we now do something with that in our industry? If the answer is yes, then how do we make these stainless steel solutions? Because if you have a look at the system out there, it's not meant to be in a processing plant or on a farm, it's meant to be in an airport. This is a really good picture of why we've been doing a lot of work on medical CT systems, but they're not really fit for purpose for our industry. And this is a real image. This is what they do in the horse sector, to actually CT a horse. So we can't run beef animals through, we can't run sheep animals through. We can run a sheep carcass through, but not a beef carcass. And the equine guys have come up with something like this. So they're combining robotics and CT hardware to get a system where you now don't have to turn a horse upside down and quieten it down. And we're thinking if we can get this to work, and I'll run a video in a moment, we might be able to use it to actually measure marbling throughout the whole middle section. So rather than just doing a slice and getting your marbling content, measure it the whole way through that middle section. And you could do an induction of feedlot as well as in processing at grading. So here's a little video on where it's up to.
We're at New Bolton Center, PenVet's large animal hospital, and we're really excited to launch our Equimagine 4DDI CT imaging system to change the face of equine imaging.
Really thrilling part of this is that we hope to be able to get these three-dimensional images in a horse that's standing. The idea is that they will not have to be placed under general anesthesia to do the majority of the studies.
From a clinical standpoint, we will literally see things that we've never seen before.
That we're not only going to find new specific abnormalities and new characterizations of those, but we also think that the opportunity that 3D imaging provides is precision.
The ability of the resolution is much higher, and we'll be able to detect injuries hopefully at much earlier stages and prevent things that could be fatal either to the horse or honestly to the rider.
So we'd be hoping to get one of these systems into Australia within the next 12 months and hopefully put it at a feedlot and give it a run. Connectivity, just very, very quickly. I think most of you might have seen an announcement we made last week or early this week to say we really want to start engaging with solution providers and producers on understanding what the connectivity issues are and trying to help you guys work out some solutions. So please come and talk to me, email me. We've got March IT out there as one of our solution providers, but we definitely want to hear from producers that want to invest with us to solve this problem. So this is not me saying I'm going to give you free connectivity. We're looking for people that have got the problems and want to invest to make a difference on their property. What about processing? We know and we keep reading that the Australian processing sector, although it's efficient in what we do over here in Australia, its costs are high. So what sort of things can we do to impact on that cost compared to the rest of the world? If you just use this as a bit of a financial model through a processing plant, the biggest cost by far is the live animal. The next one is labour. And we use that labour to then process that live animal. And if they don't get that millimetre perfect cutting right, we lose money. We don't convert everything over to that 63%. I'm going to talk through this next video just in the interest of time, but I've got 3 videos coming. This is where we're up to with lamb. So we've had a really successful program automatically doing boning cutting of lamb. Okay, and this is where it's up to. There's 3 or 4 of these systems working in Australia, and it's been a great initiative by MLA and AMPC over the last 10 years. So that's out there, it's working. And we're just about to start, or we have started the journey in beef. So you'll see a graphic very soon that mimics the lamb graphic. We know what we need to do in beef now. We've got the first module running, but now we need to finish the rest of the modules off. So here's our beef concept. We know what we're doing now. We've got the first module deployed at JBS Dinmore, and we've got the second module under development as we speak. But this just gets us to a bone-in level. What about all those cuts where we're trying to take bone away from meat or trying to seam bone? So the third video you'll see in this series is some stuff that the pork industry's got, and I've been fortunate enough to see it in France with my previous employer, and myself and a colleague are about to head to Japan to this company and see if they'll invest with us through the donor company to see if they'll convert this pork know-how into deboning lamb and beef. And that will be the final piece of the puzzle in that boning area of automation. Once again, within the next 12 months, I'll either stand up here, assuming Richard hasn't got rid of me because we know what his meat, fat, bone content is. I'll either be able to say, yes, they're interested in converting this to our red meat sector, or no, they're not. So that's the journey we're on with them at the moment. What about consumers? Michael just showed the consumer, or the supermarket of the future that exists. How else will consumers interact with our products? The photograph on the left is a device no bigger than this clicker I've got in my hand. It exists today, and consumers are using it in Europe to work out how fresh apples are, for example, before they buy it. So they're a bit of an oxymoron, they're cherry picking which apples they buy. We're working with this company to understand, are they going to deploy it in red meat? Because the thing I'm mindful of is, if consumers really use this to choose how they purchase things, let's make sure red meat is in their database. And on the other side, there's a video I'm about to play of how some consumers might actually choose to cook our product in the future. So I don't think that every household is going to have this in the next 5 or 10 years. But I want to make sure that those that have it, they're probably fairly well off, then are actually able to cook the world's best steak on it. So we're actually talking to this company at the moment about, are they thinking about integrating cooking the world's best steak and other red meat products into their offerings? Because we don't want to miss that boat either. And then just finally, I mentioned there's lots of companies, and every company you've seen up there is investing through the MLA donor company. Here's just an example of some of those companies that are putting their money into the donor company, matching it with the federal government and investing in developments for our sector. So there's quite a few. Finally, acknowledgements, just make sure I'm legally covered. And just to recap, we've got lots in the pipeline, there's lots more coming, and some of it hopefully is very, very scary because that's the place I like working in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. I think it's fascinating that we can use other industries and other models from around the world to become disruptors for the red meat industry in Australia. And that's it's a credit to Sean and Christine and the team that we're looking at different opportunities, not just in our market, but in other markets. I'm now going to open up to questions from the audience. If you do have a question for anyone on the panel, and I'll introduce the other two panelists in a minute. Can you just make your way to one of the microphones? There's 4 microphones. When you get there, just state your name and where you're from and who you're addressing the question to, please. The other two panelists joining the presenters on stage are Michael Finucane, General Manager of our International Markets team, based in Singapore, and Dr. Christine Pitt, Chief Executive Officer of the MLA Donor Company. The MLA Donor Company, for those that are not aware of it, or MDC as it's commonly referred to, is a vehicle for attracting commercial investment from individual enterprises and others for innovation that will benefit the industry. This is revenue over and above that supplied by producer levies, and every investment is matched by the Australian government funds. So it's money that we invest in the industry, using government funds and other people's, other companies' money for the benefit of the industry. Any questions? We had a question this morning, so I'll follow up on it for Michael Crowley. What is our adoption strategy, Michael? Came out this morning.
Yeah, so it was a good question from earlier on around adoption being perceived as a poor performer. I think, so I'm looking after the adoption program, which I didn't have time to include in my presentation this afternoon, but we've got a very clear strategy on what we're doing around adoption. We've got large-scale awareness programs, so the Beef Up forums that some of you hopefully have been to, pasture updates, it's U-time forums. They're really the opportunities to engage producers and large numbers, just to make sure everyone is aware of what are the latest outcomes of research and development that are ready to adopt. Then we've got another category for shorter courses between 1 to 3 days where it's a bit more specialist, so bred well, fed well workshops, business edge, grazing land management, nutrition edge programs where producers come in and there's a cost involved for producers to attend those workshops, and they're much more targeted. The third part is around assisted learning, where we've got smaller groups of producers who engage on a longer term basis, where they'll meet with a private consultant, and they work with that consultant to develop a program targeted to their priorities. And so we're rolling that out at the moment. That program's called Profitable Grazing Systems. And we're making all of our information available, working with those deliverers to improve the quality of what they can deliver. And then as a result, coming out of that, our investment is to collect the information, so we've got an evidence-based approach to what people are learning, so how are their skills improving, but more importantly, what are the returns for their business, and what's the return on their investment. So we ran a pilot for 12 months, and the average improvement in profitability for the businesses involved was $30,000, and that was 96 businesses that were engaged, and that was over a 9-month period. And we've built that program, a strategy around that program to roll that out. We also have producer demonstration sites where producers in groups will look at making some changes and looking at what the benefits are. I think the other initiative which Christine launched last year was the Producer Innovation Fast Track program. That really blew us away. We originally had a budget of $4 million worth of projects we thought would come forward, and there was over $16 million of applications that came through. And that really highlights to me that producers are willing to put money on the table, and I think it also challenges our traditional models of driving adoption. So we're really looking at how that pilot goes, what do we get out of that, and really taking looking at a different approach for adoption. But we need to take a whole farm system approach and a value chain approach in our adoption, and move away from doing feed-based work and genetics work and these things in isolation. We'll build them together and have a more holistic approach. So I guess it's my responsibility to improve the performance of adoption. I'm committed to doing that, and I'll certainly be held accountable for the performance of the adoption program.
Thanks, Mick. I've got a question.
There's a few people won't like what I'm going to ask, but firstly, let me congratulate the MLA on the work they're undertaking. I used to work for Austrade, and so I can sort of benchmark where you're at and where you've come from, and it's fantastic. My question is on biosecurity, which is, for where I come from, it's on the far south coast, has always been an issue. If someone wanted to close down, and I'd hate to say the animal welfare people, but anyone who was against the livestock or the red meat industry could easily close it down by introducing foot and mouth disease into the feral deer population. Has MLA looked at or modelled what would happen if foot and mouth disease got into feral animals, particularly deer, because it wouldn't close down the industry on a farm-by-farm basis or on a state. It would close it in the whole of Australia. That's the way the feral deer population is spreading.
Okay, panellists, who wants to? Jane?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack. Yep. So thank you very much for the question. I guess I'm not aware of any actual modelling that's been done specific around the outbreak of foot and mouth disease per se in a deer population. Certainly biosecurity is a massive risk right across the country. And what we do have in place is emergency disease response systems that actually do risk analyses around that type of activity. So not deer specific, but certainly there has been modelling done.
Thank you. Other questions? Microphone 3.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brad Hayward. We are bullock fatteners from South Gippsland in Victoria. And my question or comment probably won't be anything new, but it's directed to you, Jane. It's about traceability. On our property, we buy weaner calves in, sell them as bullocks. On average, we lose 10% of the NLIS tags every year. I'm assuming that those numbers stay on your system and are still there, but they're actually not there. And of those 10%, of course, they lose lifetime traceability. Not sure how that goes with all your modelling and your numbers and your data, but that's certainly an issue. And it's an issue that we can't control because we're buying it from somebody else, and most of it is around where they place it in the ear, non-readers as well. Get plenty of those sorts of things at the same time.
Sure, yeah, so certainly aware of the tag retention issue, and we're actually looking at lots of alternative ways that we can look at different tagging mechanisms as opposed to, staying with an ear tag, but very aware that that's a problem.
Ian.
Yeah, good afternoon. Just wanted to probably address this to Michael Crowley. Michael, to you and Sarah and your whole crew. And can I add in the likes of the David Hills in the room that do such a great job for Cattle Council and are rarely ever seen when these great presentations go up and we see just how far MSA is being taken and the opportunities and it's probably more exciting than it's ever been, I reckon, the future for MSA when we tag on all these other things and obviously not the least of it and pretty close to my heart is the EQG cipher. And I was interested, Michael, in your figures on the cost to industry of that, of those cattle not being graded or being not fitting into programs. And I think there's probably some more costs that are probably harder to quantify, but there'd be an awful lot of cattle being mouthed out there, and the 4 and 6 teeth cattle being cast aside and not even put through the MSA program. But one thing that's pretty close to my heart, and I really hate, is lost opportunity in the industry, and I think that's what we're talking about. So just last week, typical week at home, we're bringing grass-fed cattle through, and we're mouthing them. We're fat scanning and doing all sorts of other things, and weighing, obviously, and looking at weight gains. But there's cattle there. And in some of our programs, they go up to 4 teeth. So there's cattle with 4 teeth, but it happens the same with 2 teeth programs. So there's cattle there that are look likely that they'll cut an extra tooth in the next few weeks, couple of months. The feed's unbelievable that you could put them back on, but we're scanning those cattle and we're sending 5 and 6 and 7 mil cattle into the works because they're going to cut teeth. Those cattle aren't ready to sell. They're not going to make anywhere near the quality product they could if we kept them for another couple of 2 or 3 months and got them up to 11, 12, 13 mil of fat. So that is just a massive lost opportunity. It annoys the hell out of me as a producer, but what do? You've got to try and fit in these processor specifications. So there is a much, much bigger cost than you identified today. And there's also the whole human and animal welfare cost of mouthing cattle. So the sooner we got things like live ossification measures and we talk about dentition right out of the industry, the better.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, it's a great comment, and I I don't know, Sean, if you want to comment on any live stuff that you're looking at down the track, but just on, I think it's a credit to the industry to have the foresight around the changes that have come through the language review, because I think without that change, that situation, you know, wouldn't change, because we haven't created the opportunity for that change. So the first step was getting it through the review and commercialised. We've got about 5 supply chains actively engaged in looking at their data and what transitioning to EQG would mean. Those early movers influence the rest of the industry. As I mentioned, there's one very large company that's got product already now going overseas. Sarah and the team have worked tirelessly with Department of Ag and to get approval from FSIS, and our international officers have been a tremendous support in making sure there won't be disruptions to trade. So we've really starting to clear the way and reducing those barriers to adoption, and we're committed as a group to work with industry, as I said, and I think it's a really good opportunity to probably have more of those discussions in and make sure that we've got the processors and brand owners making sure they're engaging in those conversations so that they can also understand the pain points. We need you know, I saw a great term the other day, a coalition of the willing. This is a voluntary program, but the benefits for all of industry to engage are really clear. We can articulate what we can capture through grids, but also the price signals need to evolve. I think we'll see grids evolve. I think anyone that saw what Tom put up around how simple grids could be, and it's great to see a large supply chain moving down that path. And they're the early mover, and you know, we just need to support the people willing to make those changes, and we'll do what we can to support those brand owners. We've got a great co-marketing program. We've got a full-time MSA education officer. We've got the adoption team. We've got our private sector deliverers. We have a network through the regional consultation model with the producer committees and their members. And we've got to utilise those networks to get the messaging out there. So hopefully today, everyone can walk away and identify that those are the opportunities on the table, and we actively pursue them.
Thanks. Any other questions?
James Jackson, yes, I better have a question. I was just wondering, Michael, the eating quality work difference on sucker lambs versus yearling lambs, it seems a bit curious to me that research is going to be delivered after the decision on the lamb definition decision. Can you give an update on, you know, the timeline on that eating quality research that Pethic's doing?
Yep, so the research between new season and old season lambs is happening in this financial year. What we know from our data that there's a continuum of eating quality, and as animals get older, the day that they cut their teeth, similar to the beef situation, the day a lamb becomes a hogget, quality doesn't just fall off a cliff like the price does. So we've tested product out to 36 months of age across loin cuts as well as leg cuts, and the loins certainly decline at a slower rate as animals get older compared to the leg cuts. And we're working with Sheep Producers Australia, the Australian Meat Industry Council, through a sheep industry task force to address those language issues, and through the Sheep CRC that work is being funded through. David Pethick and the Lamb Supply Chain Group and other members of that group come and give updates to the task force so that the industry can make informed decisions about how that research is implemented. So, James, I guess we've got a very good and very clear due process in how we address changes with industry, and the Sheep Industry Task Force is a great vehicle for that. So we've got all supply chain participants represented there, both peak councils and people outside of the peak councils through the Lamb Supply Chain Group, all actively engaged. So if there are to be changes to things like the Lamb Definition Review and any other language changes for the sheep industry, that task force making recommendations to the Australian Meat Industry Language and Standards Committee is a great due process and a great platform for addressing those language issues.
Okay, any more questions? There was a question this morning, Lisa, you might want to talk to it. Not quite the elephant in the room that you've had before, but marketing of animal welfare standards in the domestic market. We don't do it, and we have such high standards. Why do we not talk about it on the domestic market, or do we in different formats?
Certainly, when we think, thank you, Alistair, when we think about MLA's role, you know, it is typically one of promoting generic benefits when we think about our marketing programs. And until fairly recently, the benefits that consumers have sought in order of priority have actually been around nutrition, convenience and versatility, and that has been the primary focus of our marketing effort. We do, of course, have finite resources. We'll continue to watch the trends, and I shared quite openly the trend today. There are more consumers who are interested in animal welfare credentials. But as an industry, we have to be absolutely confident that if we choose to make that part of our generic marketing campaign, each and every cut, you know, needs to be compliant. Otherwise, we will certainly find ourselves short when it comes to, you know, advertising standards, consumer law, etc. So at this point, it's not something that we actively promote as part of our holistic generic marketing campaigns, because there are other purchase drivers, and I need to make sure that every campaign dollar spent, you know, delivers a return to farm gate.
Great, thank you. Do you want to come to the microphone? Thanks.
Mike Deckman, just on the adoption particularly, and it's a comment, and the quality assurance line right back to the farmer. Have we, it comes back to your programs, the accreditation in the various formats that we all go through. Is there anything on the agenda anywhere on continuing professional development for the farmer that's recorded that will link into that chain, so that you're going right back to the basics, keeping it simple? So right from where the farmer he's trained, we can show you that he is educated in his field, and or the farmer can use it as value adding for himself, that he shows that he's continuing to professionally develop himself.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we've certainly discussed whether there is the ability to provide certification from going through different programs in which we've implemented. I think I guess we've had that conversation around. One of the things coming at us is we're getting asked for more evidence around sustainability, and certainly having an evidence-based approach to what we're doing around sustainability will become really important in the not too distant future. I guess at the moment we don't have those certifications in place, but if it is going to add value based, you know, an evidence-based approach to what producers have done, I think it really could add to, you know, when we do get audited and having those records to be able to, you know, really hand those over. But I guess that's something that isn't quite there today, but I'll be interested to, I guess, progress your thoughts on what might be really useful to have and to make sure it's addressing the purpose.
So, thank you.
Thanks. No more questions? So please join me in expressing thanks to the members of the MLA leadership team for their presentations today. Thank you, panellists. Before we break, earlier on the year you may have seen a media release that came out saying that Meat and Livestock Australia has been awarded the first annual Hitachi Global Transformation Award for its work in using data to help drive innovation in the red meat industry. I'd like to invite Owen Keats from Hitachi, Richard Norton, MD of MLA, and Sean Starling to the stage, so Owen can present the award that was announced at Next 2017 by Hitachi in Las Vegas, and the MLA won the award from a field of 5 international finalists. So well done, MLA, and thank you, Owen. Thank you. So thanks to the audience for the participation today, either in the room or online. That comes to the conclusion of the second session, and session 2 is closed. We're now going to take a small break. We'll be back in the room at 3:30 for the MLA AGM. Can I remind you, if you haven't already registered for the AGM, registration is still open at the front desk, so you still have time to do so. And we'll see you back in this room at 3:30. Thank you.